Hi, my name is Dr. Jiulin Teng. Today I'd like to talk about innovation and why true innovation is so rare and why there is great disparity in the distribution of true innovations. And I also want to talk about some possible strategies on the national and international scales whereby we could alleviate these problems and make innovation more common and really drive economic progress. So this basically is based on. So this talk is based on an article that I wrote yesterday. I published it on my blog, so you can check it out. So it goes like this, right? I observed that the economic history really is written by innovators. It is innovations that continually push that changes the means of production or the business models that completely displace old industries with new ones, old ways of doing business with new ways of doing business. And it is, of course, we could argue that there are at times inefficiencies in terms of fairness, in terms of inequality that arise because there is because the social and political systems are not fitted for the changes in the means of production. And this at times in history have led to revolutions, but not always so dramatic. Sometimes it's just different ways of changing the laws, of changing social, public, and governmental interventions to reinstall fairness, to adjust the social system, to work with new levels of technology. So I think that is another discussion anyway, right? So in this talk, I focus on why there is this unevenly distributed innovation and why innovation is so rare. This is the first part. Now, I do see that this being the case, and I think perhaps most people would agree this being the case. And some would argue that this is because different people use different ways to argue it. But some people are a little bit more extreme, radicalized, and whereas some other people are a bit unwilling to make this judgment and instead point to anecdotal evidence where people or places where there is very few innovation are considered good innovators just to promote their belief. What I'm saying here and what I'm seeing is that there is indeed a disparity in terms of where true innovations come from. And really across the board, in my opinion, it is too rare, and I think there are things we can do about it. But to do something about it, first we need to know what were the problems. And we know that by basically really looking into some of the fundamental reasons that could cause basically that can impede innovation. So I can think of basically 5 issues. The first one is impatience. Impatience is very common in modern culture. People are driven to obtain results as quickly as possible. You want to obtain fame as quickly as possible, as young as possible. You want to make money as quickly as possible, and you really don't consider too much. You don't want to make long-term bets, long-term investments into something that is unpredictable. This is short-termism. Short-termism is very common. It in the short term, I think, indeed increases the economic output, but usually at high costs of future development. It could be, for example, it could be in business. It could be raising a lot of debt for short-term rise in revenue, but at the expense of long-term development. It could be cutting research and development in some big companies such as IBM had done, in fact, which basically cost them their position, their competitive position, and now we already see that it's almost a failed company. And then we see a lot of developing countries pushing the economic development at the cost of a huge environmental cost, which depletes the resources and damages the environment to such a degree that it harms sustained economic growth and development. Right, so this short-termism, and I think short-termism also applies here. It's a big issue in innovation. The second thing I think is education, because education is I think the education that we have today, especially in some developing countries, but I think really across the board, is very good at teaching students facts, known knowns. They're not really so good at telling people what are some of the known unknowns. Those tend to be asterisks, but the most important is unknown unknowns, which basically are not taught, students are not taught to make questions, to seek questions, to ask the right questions. It is a big skill. I did some research in my time. I find that I hadn't been very good at it, I freely admit. And I do see that a lot of the people who have made some publications in my area tend not to have asked good questions because their results are not interesting, right? You need to be asking the interesting questions, the right questions, so that you get interesting results that are impactful. That's, I think, another very severe, very critical issue. The third is conformity in culture. I think it's a feature in a lot of societies. And I do think norms are, as it is not something that we could target at least in the short, medium term to change, to promote innovation. But we must acknowledge that part of the disparity in innovation could be explained by norms, because when a society is had stronger norms, the stronger the norm, I think, the weaker the innovation. And the fourth issue is a lack of systematic innovation. So what I mean by systematic innovation is a system that really that inspires people, that helps people to organize their thoughts, to distill their thoughts, to distill their ideas, to commercialize, to develop, and to scale. And this requires not just some changes in education, but it also needs a whole ecosystem, an entire ecosystem that helps basically innovators to succeed. That's something that is I think broadly lacking. There have been a lot of new incubators, I think, popping up in the last decade. That's in itself, it's a good thing. But on the other hand, because it is combined with short-termism, because a lot of what they want to do is, incubators relates to venture capital, and it relates to things that requires a quick turnaround, 5 6 years, I think 6 7 years maybe, exit. And this means that the time, the investment that's given for innovation may not always be sufficient. Case in point, the GPS, the internet, the computer, and even automobiles, those were basically innovations that for very long period of time were not broadly commercialized, were not profitable to do, but they were done because there was some interest in it. A lot of times in defense, but in defense or the military, right? But not every innovation, not everything that has great value would have equal value for the military, and we cannot count on the defense spending of a certain country to really fund innovation across the board. So that's that. And the last one is funds, and this is something that a lot of people point to. And basically, it does indeed limit what can be done and what cannot be done. But I think it should not, it's just like conformity, it's not something that we should really target change, because I think the availability of funds, it's a secondary effect of innovation, because when innovation is at a great level, it pushes economic development, and with the economic development, we have more money available that feedback to innovation. So to break this loop, it is important to look at some other places, at least at the same time. So these are my analysis of why there is a lack of innovation, but and why it is distributed unevenly. What about addressing these issues? Obviously, some of these issues are easier to address than others, and some could only be addressed at considerable cost and possibly maybe unattractive considering the cost, right? But I do believe that there could be a way that's either on the national level or on the international levels where changes can be made to the benefit of the public. Part of it is, I think, one immediate step is greater emphasis and investment in systematic innovation. So this, I think, does not necessarily encroach upon the interest of the establishment, and maybe only some oligarchs who tend to slightly disagree, but not vehemently. And so there is this is a path of, I think, the least resistance. It just needs more attention and investment, and a system set up such that more people can be inspired and incentivized to innovate. And also that innovations can be brought to success in a more conducive environment. At the same time, I think we also need a system that credits innovators who fail to succeed with their innovation. There should be different endpoints, not just the ultimate endpoint, which is making a lot of money. We should change the culture, the system, to one that is not winners take all. Because in a system of winners take all, there absolutely is going to be a lot of short-termism. There is going to be invariably people shying away from engaging in innovation, and that is, I think, counterproductive. Obviously, here again, some oligarchs would disagree, and because the oligarchs would have a lot of persuasion, that could mean some resistance. But I think it could perhaps be done. Not entirely sure, but I think it perhaps could be done. And if it can be done, I'm pretty sure that if it is done, there will be a dramatic effect. And last but not least, I think educators should really start to inspire students to ask questions, to get not just to acknowledge that education is not just about giving the answers. It is also about asking the questions so that we can find new answers, better answers, right? So that, I think it's going to be a slow process. It's going to be some resistances because of some established interests. That is how it is in the social economics lives that we are in. Nothing more we can talk about there. Lastly, of course, there are those conformity and financial aspects. I basically, as I said, I think those are secondary facts, and I think as the human development of the public of a society really improves, I think those will change over time. Forcing changes upon a society that is not ready is probably counterproductive. And basically, to sum up, what I'm basically saying is, what I'm advocating is an intervention into the free market of innovation, just like a lot of governmental innovation in other aspects of economic activities. Now, we need to acknowledge that innovation and the economics are basically very tightly intertwined. We need to acknowledge that even though it is very difficult to put a price tag on innovation before it is commercialized, we need to get better at it. We need to be able to intervene, to have some governmental intervention, use from different systems to basically to counter the short-termism that is prevalent, to incentivize, to inspire people to engage in innovation, and to make it more easier, more conducive to innovate and to bring benefits to the public through innovation. So that's basically what I'm thinking. And if you have if you have some other thoughts, you can leave a comment on this video. So thanks for watching this video, and have a great day.